Hey, so in this video, I wanted to look through this artist edition of John Romita's amazing Spider-Man work. It's really hard to get this whole book into the frame and do it justice, so there's going to be a lot of close-ups and zooming in and zooming out, so bear with me, but I want to try and kind of just show you the scale of this book. Like, if you see, this is my hand on top of it, so this book is what seems like I would assume, I don't know, 15 by 25 or something like that, or maybe 18 by 24 or something. It's enormous, and it really it's such a great way to look at the work. And these artist editions are really cool because they're printed at the actual size that I'm going to skip to the pages here, that the pages were created on. So these are really just photographs of the actual original art, which if you're a comic book fan and a comic art fan, this is for me, this is such great stuff. This is like the very next best thing as to seeing the original pages in person. So you get to see, the notes made on top, some of the writing from the artist and Stan Lee actually on the bottom. It's really, really great. It's a little hard to capture on video though, so I'm just going to kind of do my best to kind of take you on a tour of some of this book if you don't have access to it in person. John Romita's work, as far as like early Spider-Man work goes, John Romita, to me, and I'm not alone in this at all, he was like the best Spider-Man artist in those early days. Pretty sure he followed Steve Ditko, who was the original, the first Spider-Man artist. So those were big shoes to fill, but he really brought a certain sense of, like, I guess for lack of a better word, like illustration to some of this work. A lot of these feel like the drawing quality was like evolved. From what I know of John Romita's history, he came from the illustration world and brought some of that sense of style and sophistication of drawing into comics. And it was really great to see that combination of like action and adventure and superheroes blended with like a real like touch of artistry and really just beautiful work. I mean, he wasn't alone. This was the golden age, so there was just so much amazing art during this time. And some of the reprints of this stuff doesn't always do it justice, so to get to see like the black and white actual original art really just like puts into perspective like how much went into this stuff. Like, look at how big this page is. Seeing it at this scale is so cool because you get to really just like imagine the artist like hunched over this paper, just like flowing that brush across the paper, the letterer doing the letters right onto the board. There's something so nice about it. I love every line here, just feels like so beautifully done. There's a care to each panel. Like, it just feels like there's a delicateness to each face that was drawn here and inked here. All the lines really mean something, and like there's a lot of feeling behind all this stuff. It feels like the intention of the artist was really to make this as dynamic and exciting as possible. And I think they did a really great job at that. I mean, in some ways, some of the storytelling and some of the tropes are a little bit dated, but you got to imagine at this time, if you're like, a teenager reading comics, this stuff would have blown you away. I mean, even now, in present day, this stuff is like, so amazing. But as an artist, it's really great to like kind of study this stuff. And I love how like, they didn't have to do like fancy, crazy page layouts. This is just a 246 6-panel grid, and it really matters what's in each panel and the shots that the artist picks to move the story along. So it works storytelling wise, and then as a whole, aesthetically, it really works. It reminds me a little bit of, I guess, European comics, modern European comics kind of keep that alive a little bit. They're less inclined to play around with like page design, and it's more about what's happening in each panel. Like, look at the drama, just boom, 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 right there. You know, when I see this stuff, I get really inspired just to kind of like slow down. Like when you're drawing a phone, really get into that phone. You know, it doesn't mean that it has to be overly detailed and overly rendered, but whatever you could do, whatever lines you could use to make that phone feel like a phone, and adding some drama to it, that kind of stuff is like so inspiring to me. Because like that phone right there feels like a character just as much as these two characters. And like, I guess for lack of a better word, it just feels like there's a level of like care that the artist put into drawing and rendering that. John Romita's women were just like so great too. He just drew the most like beautiful women. I love the way he drew hair, eyes. You know, his character design was so cool, and like, you know, it really inspired generations of artists after him. Look at this panel right here. Like that panel alone, I feel like that's something you could just like put on your wall right there, you know? And as the book goes on, I'll take bigger flips here. As the book goes on, you see how the style evolved. From what I know, again, of John Romita's history, it feels like I heard him say in an interview once, there was a certain point, and I forget at what issue, but there's a certain point where he just like, he found his groove, you know, he just like kind of like figured stuff out. There was like a while there where he felt like he wasn't really, things weren't clicking, even though like I could look at this stuff and be blown away by it. There was a level of unsatisfaction with some of the work. And then there was a certain point, and again, I forget at what issue, but everything kind of came together and just started clicking. And, you know, that's a common thing for artists in general. I mean, sometimes in comics, sometimes you don't really hit your stride until, you know, a few issues into a series, or, you know, a couple of chapters into a graphic novel. And then you finally get like comfortable with the characters. You feel like there's something that you can bring to this, you know, that's different. In the beginning, you kind of just want to do your best job, tell the story as clearly as possible, meet your deadlines, all that stuff. And then you do it long enough and things start to click, and you feel like, well, I could do that stuff as well as kind of bring something special to it as well. And sometimes you don't find what that thing is until, you know, you work on it for a while. And so it's a great thing to hit that stride, but it's also frustrating because you feel as though there's like a level of inconsistency as well, because you kind of want to go back and like redo those previous pages. But sometimes it's, you know, it's nothing that anyone from the outside could really see. You know, it's more of your own internal process and evolution as an artist. So, because even with like this early John Romita work, you know, I'm blown away by it, but he might have thought that it wasn't up to his own standards. This is really great. It's amazing that most of these pages had been tracked down and were able to be photographed and added into this book. There's a few pages that I guess they weren't able to find, so they just put like kind of like just a black and white reproduction instead of the actual artboard. But for the most part, this whole book is all the originals. Look at that, like Dynamic drawing. So great. Especially, like, you got to think this was like the early to mid 60s, and this kind of stuff was, you know, so groundbreaking, really. You know, comics weren't, in America at least, you know, comics weren't really this dynamic until Marvel started doing this stuff. It really paved the way for so many future comic artists and comic stories. And as much as that, you know, that action stuff is so great, I love this, like, just day-to-day teenage Peter Parker stuff, because I just feel like in so many ways this is where John Romita's work really shines. You know, there is almost like an Alex Toth vibe to some of this stuff. The lettering placement, the panel compositions, the brush lines, and you really, you know, again, trying to get the whole scope of this into the shot without losing focus. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 panels on this page, and you know, that's a hard thing to make look interesting and not overcrowded. And I feel like just this was done so well. There was also so much more to read on a comic page back then. I feel like there's a lot less words now, which is not always a bad thing. So great. It's an original, like these openers were so cool. So anyway, this is just kind of like a glimpse. I don't want this video to go on too long, but let's see if there's any stuff in the back. There might be some covers here. Oh God, look at that. Look at that cover. So amazing. Like these lines, just these like speed lines over here. So delicately and purposefully done. Like these lines are just like perfect. In the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, there's like tips on how to ink with the ruler using a brush. And that's just one of those like old school inker tricks that I've never to this day been able to figure out without like just messing things up. But yeah, these artists really just had that stuff down. Love that face. So perfect. And again, like that design of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, that inspired like generations of Spider-Man artists. Look at this. That's so cool. So yeah, this is a little glimpse into this book. I'm sure this is maybe available still online somewhere or at your local comic shop. I think, yeah, IDW, they tend to put out, they'll team up with the original publisher and put out a lot of these artist editions, and they're really, really great if you get your hands on them. Like I said, it's like the next best thing to seeing the original art in person. And if you have any interest in creating your own comic art, this is really like, it's one of the best ways to learn, is just to look at, you know, original comic art and see how that stuff was made. You know, you could see in some of this stuff, you could see the eraser lines and some of where they would white things out and draw on top of it. Yeah, it's really great to see. So yeah, cool. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments about John Romita's work or just artist editions in general, let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.